Welcome back, folks. It is April, 24th or 22nd? I got two different things on my screen there, fellas. 24th. My Lord. I used to joke how I'm the guy that makes the errors on here, but we're going to fix that live. What was the 22nd? There we go. Now we're live, and it's the right date. Welcome back, folks. It is April 24th. 2022. I'm joined by the normal crew here. The Captain Steve Crow out of Elkhart, and Sweet Lou is in his perch in Lafayette, like he is every week. Fellas, I appreciate you joining me again, and for those of you joining us live or watching the recorded version here, man, we've got some high school stats to talk about this week. We're giving out our fourth baseball across India player of the week, third or fourth? Which is it? I can't even remember. I think it's Decker, him, and him. Fourth. BAI player of the week. What's this shirt and this hat about that I got on? We'll talk about that here in a minute. But, fellas, tell me about your week a little bit before we get talking into stats. Steve, you put out some more articles again this week. What have you been up to?
I got to see a couple of games in the weather. I froze in one game and went to the northwestern game on Tuesday, and that was a lot of fun. And then I saw South Central and Portage, and it was a few days later, and it was a lot nicer game. And then yesterday I caught part of Carroll and Northridge, and it was 80 plus degrees, and lots and lots of runs. I guess the bats were heating up there because the second game was 3-1 Carroll. In the first game it was 21-13. Second game, and it was like 19-1 and after 3 innings. But Northridge, put up some crooked numbers of its own.
Well, you mentioned two teams we're gonna talk about there because South Central, the Union Mills variety, had an interesting week, and Carroll's still on a roll. Carroll of Florida. That is the Carroll. You say, yeah, Carroll, Florida.
Fort Wayne.
Fort Wayne, right.
Yeah, I was talking about Carroll of Fort Wayne in this
Okay,
case, but
okay.
Carroll of Florida is playing well too.
Yeah, they're definitely on a roll, for sure. And so we're gonna talk about those teams. Jeff, how's things going up there in Lafayette at Sweet Loeb Stadium?
Well, been pretty busy. The Broncos, had a 5-game losing streak earlier in the month, and then they went on a 4-game winning streak, and then ran into the Eagles of Zionsville earlier this week, and you're going to talk about it later, but a no-no thrown against them.
Mm-hmm.
We did score a run. Zionsville kind of threw the ball all over the field. I think they had 4 errors in that game. And just kind of resting up a little bit. We get ready for conference play again, the Harrison Raiders. We got 5 games this week. Doubleheader capped off on this coming Saturday against Pendleton Heights. But it's been an up and down roller coaster. Kind of excited today. Not talking about high school, but I'd like to mention, if I can, and this one belongs to the Reds. Yes, we broke 11-game losing streak today. We got the Cardinals, and man, I'm in a good mood tonight. So let's get after San Diego on Tuesday and Wednesday, and but pretty busy week. Seeing a lot of games. It's good that Steve mentioned about the 80 degrees. It's boy, it's awful nice to finally get some nice weather to play some high school baseball, Dan.
Yeah, no kidding. I'll tell you, I'm seeing a lot of, I know you follow the Reds as much or more than I do, and there were a lot of people calling for some shuffling up of the upper management in that franchise. I'll tell you what, they're, I could talk all day about how disappointing it is to be a Reds fan, but all those Cub fans would love it. So let's get in and let's talk some stats. Let's talk about the week in baseball, and we're gonna cover a few things that even went the previous week as well, because we had a that shortened episode last week because of Easter. So let's get into it here a little bit here, guys. We had some milestones. We had a few coaching milestones that were passed this week. I want to get these pictures on Twitter too. Some of these I've taken and they're already on Twitter, but I want to make sure we get them on our page as well. Coach Cesanella got his 100th win this week. I'm not for sure if all of those are at Hamilton Southeastern. Do you know, either of you guys know if those are all at HSE?
No, I'm sure they're not, because he was at Brebeuf before that. He's
Okay.
only been at a couple of 3 years.
That's right. Okay, I couldn't remember how long he'd been there. Of course, he's got a state title with him. And that was his first year. I think he got the state title with him back in, was that 16 or that was later? It was more recent than that. But anyway, and that's however many it is at Hamilton Southeastern. That's that many wins in the Hoosier Crossroads Conference, which we're going to talk about later. Just the crazy that conference is right now. I mean, it's, we thought we had a winner. We thought we had a good idea of who was going to take that conference, but things got shaken up this week. Another one here, Blake Mollenkoff, the Caston Comets. I got that hat from him firsthand. Big win number 200 for him. And I can't remember who that was against, but that was also this week. A big win for him. Then, of course, Scott Upp of the LaPorte dynasty. He's an Indiana high school baseball. He's an Indiana baseball Hall of Famer. He got win number 500 there at LaPorte. Big win there for him. Coach Ben Reel. Now, this was not last week, but the week before that, I believe. Was that right, Steve?
Yeah, that's the same thing with Scott Up. It was a week before last.
Yeah. Yep. We're adding both of them in. Yep. We're putting them in because we had that short episode last week.
Didn't
We're
get
putting
a
them
chance
both
to
in.
mention it last week.
Yep. So Coach Reel got big win 500, and he's not done. You know he's going to rack them up. They already have, I think I think they reached 30 wins now for the year. We're going to go over that here in a little bit. But here's a big one. Coach Rich Maloney with 900 with the not all with the Ball State Cardinals, but win number 900 for him. Steve, tell us a little bit about him. I know, where was he before Ball State?
Well, Rich went to Western Michigan, played for Fred Decker, who was a Hall of Famer. He ended up at Ball State first tenure. Then he went to Michigan, had success there, and now he came back to Ball State. He's been back to Ball State, I think this is 8 or 9 years in his second tenure. And I sent him a text congratulating him, and he responded back. He's a class guy, and he said it was just gives us a chance to reflect on all the outstanding players and coaches we had, and what a blessing, the whole thing. And I think they cherish every win because they take a team photo after every victory. Or maybe if it's a doubleheader sweep, they get one photo that day. But so they're not taking them for granted.
Well, and one thing I like, well, obviously he churns out talent, year in and year out. But another thing I like about him, he's one of the few.
He's such a good. He's a scouting and finds the right people to coordinate his scouting, because at a mid-major they do very well.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and he's one of the few college coaches that he'll post on Twitter stuff about the team from his personal Twitter account. You don't see that a lot. He gets, usually it's just, well, a lot of these, the D1 schools, even the mid-majors, they have their own social networking person that does all their social networking stuff, but he gets on with his personal account too and does it. So I like that. Now, let's move on to some more stories here. This is why I got the shirt on, of course. The week before this, of course, this is kind of this past 2 weeks in baseball across Indiana, was Jackie Robinson Day. And of course, Jackie Robinson does have ties to Indiana. He played for the Clowns. I got Robinson written on the back of my jersey. Matter of fact, this was the jersey from last year's Jackie Robinson Day for the base, thebaseindy.org. I want to throw that name out there. Rob Barber's been on our show a couple times. And just a great guy. He's got a great mission here. What the Base Indy does is they use baseball as the engine to provide academic opportunity for inner city kids. And it's just a great, because anybody that knows baseball knows that inner city baseball right now is struggling a little bit. There's some heated debates on why. Some people say it's all travel ball's fault. Nah, that's not true. But there's a lot of reasons, and this is a great organization. I'm talking about the Base Indy. Again, it's thebaseindy.org. Matter of fact, I'm going to throw that in the chat room right now for those of you watching us live. Thebaseindy.org. And if you go there, you'll learn all about it. The guy's name's Rob Barber. He's the guy that runs it, and I talked to him a little bit offline this week, and he's got some great things lined up. So just keep an eye on that, because he's I can't talk about a lot of the things that he's got working on, but he's got some great things. And the Jackie Robinson Day last year, you may remember, was the first time they ran it, and it was the first high school Jackie Robinson Day celebration in the country. This was year 2 of it. That picture you got right there, Jeff took that picture, or our Jeff, at Lafayette, Jeff, at Loeb Stadium. Jeff, do you know who that player is right there? We'll give him a...
No, that's Brady Preston, our starting catcher, starting catcher. And of course, you'll say Indianapolis people are going to see a lot of him, because he's going to be a Bulldog and be the quarterback for the Butler Bulldogs down the road. So,
yep. I'm glad you got him on there too. Yeah, he was on the show. He's the guy that has the stat, right? The Loeb Stadium stat, right?
That's correct.
And what we're talking about, folks, if you're not privy, is that person you see right there in the picture on the right in this year's version of the Jackie Robinson Day celebration shirt. Brady Preston owns the prestigious statistic of hitting the first official game home run in the new Loeb Stadium, and that was last year. I think it was versus CC, wasn't it, Jeff?
Against Rossville.
Rossville, okay. So that's a pretty cool stat that'll never be. That's one of those stats that it's not a record, it's a stat, but it's a stat that you can't take away. I thought that was pretty cool. That's the. I wanted to keep this screen on there a little bit too, because you can still text that number right there. Text the word base to 55433, and it'll just send you some information back and some links. Don't worry, you're not signing up for a timeshare in Florida or anything like that. They're just going to send you some informational tweets that you can click on and follow at your discretion. So don't worry, you're not signing up for something. I did that text as well. I got the links. I got all the information. It's just one set of links, and then you're good to go. So I would definitely highlight that. Of course, my whole thing with, of course, do you know what hat this is, you guys? Surely you know what hat this is, since we're talking about Jackie Robinson.
Brooklyn Dodgers.
That's right. This is my Brooklyn Dodgers hat. I actually do have an Indianapolis Clowns hat, but I put it on, and within 5 minutes, my whole head was as red as Jeff's shirt right there, because it's like 2 sizes too small. So I couldn't put it on. But I stand to this day, I acknowledge baseball from forever, but I do not acknowledge any baseball stat, any baseball record, that is, where the games that led up to that record took place before April 15th, 1947, because on that date, Major League Baseball started to become a legitimate professional organization. And unfortunately, it wasn't until 12 years later to when all Major League Baseball teams got their at least one player of color on their team. And of course, the last team to do that, I believe, was the Pirates, or the Red Sox, I believe, was the last team to integrate. But just a little side note there. So text that number or go to thebaseindy.org for more information. He's going to have that next year as well, folks, so keep an eye out for it. Let's move along here, if my mouse works, to our, yeah, no kidding, I'm clicking. There we go. That little delay. Did I skip one? Let me go back a slide, make sure I didn't slip one. Skip one there. Nope, I didn't. We're back. Okay. What I wanted to go through here real quick, guys, is this is the rankings as of last week. Now, these are going to change tomorrow, and I know, Jeff, you got your votes in. Jeff Louzetter, Sweet Lou here, is our resident vote person. He gets a vote for the rankings for the IHSBCA. And a couple of things I want to highlight here. As you look at this slide, if it's in red text, that's a loss. But if it's in red text and highlighted in teal, in my opinion, that's a loss that didn't hurt them really bad. Like, let's take South Central, Union Mills. Steve, you talked about them earlier. You were at one of these games. They were 2-2 this week, and their two losses were to a 4A Portage team, which has now won 5 games in a row. So they're kind of on a streak. Their other loss was to the 2A team University, who's ranked number 1 by PBR. I think in IHSBCA they're number 2, but in PBR they're ranked number 1. So I don't consider that hurting them too much. Reason I say that, as we're looking tomorrow, it wouldn't surprise me a bit if South Central is still number 1. Bar Reeve went 4-1. They had a loss to Lincoln. Cowan, their losses were to 2A number 1 Wapahani and 2A number 6 Centerville. So I don't consider those losses hurtful for them. The team that I think will probably go down, we'll see go down tomorrow, is Washington Township. They lost 2 to Glenn this week, and I think they lost 2 last week as well. It's possible they might even drop out. Clay City, I think they're going to hang in there. I don't know. People know that Washington Township is a Randy Ball. They know that team's going to be strong, so they may keep them in there. And if Washington Township stays in, then Clay City may drop out. I don't know. But the Linton Stockton loss that Clay City had, that's a rivalry game, so that's not too bad. And Owen Valley's strong. Owen Valley's 7-2, and they're a 3A team, or two or 3A, and so I don't consider that a real bad loss either. So to be honest with you, I don't see too much movement in this 1A bracket. Do you guys see anything that may change when we wake up tomorrow and see the stats?
Not anything drastically. I think some of those teams might, shuffle the deck a little bit, but I don't think there'll be anything. I could easily see Bar Reeve or Central Catholic or even Borden, jumping up to that number 1 spot, but I don't think anybody's necessarily leaving the board. You say Washington Township might, but they might end up staying in the top 10 too. I could see that.
And nobody really ran the gamut this week. Lafayette Central Catholic, they split with West Lafayette, which is a bigger school, so that's probably not going to hurt them too much. So the Vincennes Lincoln, when the Bar Reeve lost to Vincennes Lincoln, may hurt them, but they had 4 wins. Who knows?
I think of Dan, when these teams are playing one another. These bigger schools, smaller schools, chances are they aren't in the same conference. So that probably means that the pitching lines up differently. I mean, the teams try to pitch their best pitchers in conference games, generally speaking. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes they want to send their best against the big school. But, who you got on the mound in any given day has a lot to do with what happens in high school baseball. We all know that.
Yep, absolutely. Let's take a look at the 2A bracket and see what kind of movement we got going on here. Once again, if I can get my mouse to do anything. There we go. There's 2A. Chris isn't on here. He'd gripe at me for saying, it's a Windows computer. Wapahani, they had a big win versus, it's a respectable win versus 1A number 5 Cowan. Of course, Cowan had, I think, a couple losses this week. I couldn't remember what that slide said, but and they lost to, looking down there at number 6 Centerville, and Centerville had a great week. I definitely see. Well, let's go work this top to bottom here, and you'll see where I'm going with it. Wapahani had a big win, and the loss to Centerville, the fact that they're both in the same class, I think could hurt them. University stock went up big time. They beat Lewis Cass, Shortridge, Seton Catholic, and South Central, and they beat South Central 9-0. So I mean, South Central is a Class 1A team, but they're also 1A number one. So I mean, I think that University stock went up. Um, Carroll as well. Their win versus number 7, the 2A number 7 Delphi, helps them, or at least it definitely helps them. Forest Park had a loss. The reason I had that in teal there, they had a loss, but their loss was to the 3A number 7 Silver Creek. So I don't think that hurts them. Cascade, I think their stock went up this week because they had 2 wins versus Indianapolis Lutheran. Then they beat a good Greencastle team. I think Greencastle 7-2. Greencastle's one of the teams that I see that they're 3A. And if the 3A class wasn't so stacked, they very well could be ranked. But then their other loss was to 4A number 10 Mooresville. So, or their one loss was to 4A number 10 Mooresville. So that didn't hurt them at all. Centerville had 2 big wins and 4-0 on the week. But if you look at the rest of everybody above them, I don't think they did enough to rise up. Delphi, they lost twice to Carroll of Flora. And Carroll of Flora is, matter of fact, we'll see them here in a second. Matter of fact, that should be teal right there because I think Carroll of Flora is, they're ranked in the top 10 in 4A. So, I mean, that even though they lost twice, it's a top 10 team in 4A. So that's why matter of fact, I remember saying at the beginning of the year, this 2A bracket, I think is going to be one of the most dynamic brackets. But you look here, even with the losses, in my opinion, I don't think any of the losses these teams had did enough to move them any. And of course, this top 10 is just stuff for us to talk about. The coaches look at this and they know, when we get to talk about the 4A bracket, it'll be a perfect example because of this top 10 right here. Anybody could beat anybody on any given day. So, this 1 through 10 is just kind of saying to me, this is possibly the top 10 teams, and you could, there's leeway either way. But before we move on to 3A, guys, I mean, are you in the same mindset as I am? Do you think there was any big standout wins or standout losses that would cause any movement in this other than, random voting variance?
Well, I'm not going to say who I voted for, but I just want to say the fact that, the weather's changing, Dan, and Steve mentioned about pitching. Lafayette Jeff is doing the same thing. We're not pitching our aces in conference games. We're pitching a lot of newbies, you might say, guys wanting to get some experience. And I think in the next couple of weeks, with these guys, these teams finally getting to play, 2 or 3 games in a week, I think some of these teams are going to, it's going to separate the men from the boys. They're going to be able to, solidify their starters, and more of these teams are getting into conference play, and maybe getting away a little bit from non-conference teams. But everything you've said about the first 2 classes here, I've agreed with you 100%. You look at Wapahani and they're playing stiff competition in Centerville, and every team wants to get better, and they know the saying: if you want to get better, you got to play the tougher teams. And my philosophy is right there with yours regarding the fact that they're playing somebody, but it's really not hurting them because they may be playing a 4A school.
Well, and if summarizing my thoughts, the teams that I think if anybody's stock rose this week, it's Centerville, and even Cascade with a loss. That win over Greencastle to me was huge. University, it's possible. Well, I got a feeling that University is going to jump Wapahani this week, and we could be looking at University #1 tomorrow. But we'll find out, and that's why I love it, because we get to talk about it. So let's take a look at 3A. If I can get my Windows, I know you're listening, Chris. If I can get my Windows computer to respond here. How about that lid by Wapahani, by the way, while we're looking at it? The WWF lid. It shows my age. I don't even know if it's called WWF anymore. Here's the 3A bracket. Some of the standout wins, of course, Brebeuf split with Cathedral. But as we'll see when we get to the 4A, I think Cathedral stock is going down. Guerin Catholic stock is actually going up. So that split with Guerin Catholic could hurt them. And if you look at that schedule they had this week, when you put Cathedral and then 2 games with Guerin Catholic, you can't pitch Andrew Dukanich every game, and I'm not saying he's their whole team, but that's another, when we look at the 4A, when you look at the back-to-back games, it's kind of like what you guys were talking about when you're playing non-conference teams, you may not throw the ace. So, I think they pitched Dukanich versus Cathedral. And I don't know who pitched versus Guerin Catholic, but that'll be interesting to me what happens with Brebeuf, because they split with Guerin Catholic. And Western, I think their stock went up big time. They beat Northwestern twice, Maconaquah and Kokomo, with a combined run differential of 38-4. So, Western's one of those teams we said early on that they're, buy low, sell high. And early on, I don't think they were in the top 10, and their stock continues to rise. So even though Brebeuf had a good win over Cathedral, it wouldn't surprise me if this bracket stays the same, but it also wouldn't surprise me if Western jumps above Brebeuf. Crawfordsville, I got to see play this week. Matter of fact, I got to see him play one of those games versus Tri-West, and what a game. And I'll tell you, the coach, if you saw the interview with the coach after the game, he mentioned it really good. He is actually a Crawfordsville coach that mentioned a really good point, which was, that they played them back to back, and Crawfordsville beat Tri-West 11-0 the previous day. They came back, and it just about went into overtime if it wasn't for a walk-off hit and a play at the plate that could have went either way. Tri-West might have won that game. And Tri-West, Lebanon, Crawfordsville, those are all rivalries right there with Crawfordsville. So, I think their stock kind of stays the same. Batesville went 2-1. Their loss was to the Ryle, Kentucky team, and I think that team they're right at 500 or a couple games under 500. I don't know enough about them to say if it's a good win or not, but I can say, again, going back to what you guys say, I doubt they pitched their ace versus a Kentucky team. So that may come into play. However, if you look at West Vigo, who's underneath them, West Vigo's stock continues to rise with a win over Greencastle. Again, I've talked how much I like Greencastle, but Greencastle has a tough schedule. So I think there might be 7-3 now. A win over Owen Valley. Owen Valley's right there at the same. I think they're a 7-8 win team. And then a win over a 4A team in Bloomington South. Bloomington South's not having a fantastic year, but there is, generally speaking, I think, and maybe you guys have a different opinion on this, but I think a win in a higher class team can always give you at least one widget to go higher in stock. And then I'll talk about Silver Creek real quick. And go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't think these coaches believe in moral victories. They like to win them all. But when it comes to the tournament, they'll tell you that those tough competitive games against bigger schools or just, teams that, fought tooth and nail, that's going to help them at tournament time, because, you can't have much of a letdown there. You're one and done kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So that helps. They would all like to come into the tournament at 28-0, but they'd settle for 14-14 if they're playing well at the right time, playing a tough schedule.
Exactly. And that's, we've seen that play out year in and year out. Shakamak's the one example I always go to. Lafayette Central Catholic is another one. They come into the tournament with 10 losses, but they've played such a highly competitive schedule that it prepares them to make a run in the tournament. And a lot of these things, folks, as you watch this, again, going in line with what these guys are talking about with, pitching a non-ace versus a non-conference game. When you get to the tournament, if you've got two, if you've got a solid ace and a good number two, that you can make a run. So I mean, the tournament. That's what I like about this tournament. Anybody can make a run if you got two good pitchers. So these rankings and these scores definitely don't mean anything. And I want to emphasize that to any of the high school kids watching these games. Listen to your coach, because the coach will tell you these rankings don't mean anything. They're for people like Hardy the Hat Guy that likes to talk about it, and Sweet Lou and Captain Craw. We just like to talk about them, but at the end of the day, the tournament, everybody's 0-0. So let's move on. One thing I want to mention, Silver Creek, I think these are games they should have won, but they're quality wins. And that's one thing I want to point out is it a game they should have won, and how much quality does that add to it? They beat 4A Columbus East. It's a game I think they should have won, but then they beat 2A number 4 Forest Park, a good Forest Park team. I think that actually helps them more than the Columbus East win. Gibson Southern, those two losses, though, I think hurt them. South Spencer and Princeton, I think those losses are going to hurt them. I think they'll get jumped. I don't know if they'll go out of the top 10 or not, but I think they may get bumped by Glenn, because Glenn went 4-0 this week with wins over Jimtown, Bremen, and Washington Township. So anything you guys want to add about the 3A before we take a look at the 4A bracket?
Well, I know Andrean, their week looks like this. They play Lowell twice. They play Penn. They play Fort Wayne Bishop Dwenger, and they play Marion. So that's a pretty good week to test them. I mean, they could run the table, but they could also come out of there with a couple of losses. But I think they'll be better for it if they play well, and they always seem to. So.
Well, and they're not blowing people out either. So that up there in Northwest Indiana. Matter of fact, I want to say this real quick, since you're talking about Andrean.
If they got good pitching and playing good defense, they can win those 2-1, 3-2 games.
Yep. And talking about Andrean, I am going to be in Chicago all week. So this month, tomorrow night, make sure you tune in to the Region Sports Network. I talked to my buddy Nathan Laird, who was Nathan was on the show about 4 or 5 episodes ago when we talked about the media across the state. We had him representing the Region Sports Network, and I'm going to be up there behind the mic for the Hobart and Highland game, and that's going to be a good one because I can't remember which one has which, but one of them are 8-2 and the other one's 7-1. So that's going to be a good game. It's going to be on the Region Sports Network. So make sure you tune in. I'm going to be there, and we get to talk some region baseball, which, if you follow me, I love the region baseball. Here's a bracket that has a lot going on. Westfield, matter of fact, I even told, Steve, you've been on Indiana Sports Talk with Bob Lovell 2 or 3 times. The one time I was on there, they asked me, what was the one team that you think stands out above the rest? And the one at the time, Zionsville was number 1, but I thought Westfield, from what I had seen, certainly stood out to me as the number 1 team in the state. But you look this week, of course, they had a huge win versus Carmel. Carmel's not having the year that, they were expected to have, but 19-1 over Carmel. Then, of course, they had a loss to Newcastle. And I want to talk about that one for a second before I talk about their other 2 losses. Newcastle, in my opinion, is probably the most underrated team in the state. Of course, they got a first-year coach there, and they are looking strong. I highlighted that one in red because Westfield lost to Newcastle, but Newcastle is tough. So they're going to be a team that I think if anybody that's not in any of these top 10s if we're going to have any new teams show up in a top 10 this week, I think Newcastle could be one of them. They are looking strong. Then Westfield also lost 2 games to Fishers. And this is what we were talking about that earlier, that great Hoosier Crossroads Conference. In that conference, you have Westfield at number 1 on this list. You have Fishers, number 3 on this list. You have Zionsville, which was a former number one. We could just keep on going. You're talking Brownsburg, Hamilton Southeastern, that whole nest right there. Westfield comes in, and Fishers had a couple losses before the Westfield game. So, Fisher's stock was dropping, so to speak. Then they come in and they take two from Westfield. So, I mean, and matter of fact, then they split with Huntington North. They lost the first game and then won the second game 25-2. So it was like they lost that first game. They're like, nope, this ain't going to happen again. So they come back and win 25-2. But because of those two losses, now Fisher's stock went up, but I don't think anybody's stock went up as much as Center Grove. Now, in these two games that I have listed, combined 30-4 run differential. I got a slide coming up I'm going to show you that's even more amazing than that. But, so Center Grove stock definitely went up. But look at that Evansville North. They went 4-0 with a combined 49-5 run differential. And that was versus Evansville Harrison, Wrights, North Posey, and then 2 against Memorial. Jasper the same way. Versus Heritage Hills, Wrights, Evansville, Bossy, Northeast Du Bois, and Columbus East. Combined run differential of 34-3. So, then you go to Lake Central. They split with Valpo, which, that's a rivalry game. So if it wasn't for all that stuff going on above Jasper or Lake Central, I think that loss to Valpo wouldn't hurt them. But I think it will hurt them because of everything going on, especially what happened below them. Steve, and I get my Carols mixed up. Steve, you were at one of the Carroll-Fort Wayne games. This is another team whose stock is definitely going up. They beat Columbia City, East Noble, and then those two games at Northridge, which you were at one of them, 48-14 run differential in those 4 games. So their stock went up. Lawrence North, I think their stock went down. They had a win versus North Central and Pendleton Heights. The loss for Center Grove doesn't hurt them, but the loss versus Carmel, I think, does. And then Cathedral, I think, is the one team that we're probably going to see drop out this week, even though they lost to Center Grove, and I don't think that hurts them. They lost big time to Center Grove and then lost to Brebeuf as well. So, and then you look underneath them and how Mooresville went 5-0. I think Cathedral is going to drop and maybe drop out. But they may be at 10 this week. I think Carroll-Fort Wayne's going to jump Lake Central. It's just kind of my thoughts, on the 4A bracket. This 4A bracket, there's going to be a summary of this 4A bracket. I think we're going to see some movement this week on this one more than any of them. You guys have any thoughts on that?
I think Center Grove is, on the rise so much. I mean, you could just, flip a 3-headed coin and Fisher's Center Grove, Westfield number 1. Any of those would make sense. Something tells me that Center Grove, just from what they've done recently, is going to sit at the top there. I mean, they got a tie and they won the rest of their game so far. So it's hard not to overlook that kind of resume. And, I was looking at the stats there, and going into the weekend, going into Saturday, Tyler Cerny, who we had on the show, it's IU commit. He was hitting 577 with 11 extra base hits and 12 RBIs in the first 8 games he played. So he didn't even play all the team's games. But Jacob Wilson and Ben Murphy were 3-0 on the mound. So they're just they're loaded for bear and Greenwood.
Yeah, there is some. If you look at that list right there is some D1 talent right there that is crazy. I think, Zionsville's not. Zionsville's not even on there anymore, and they got 7 D1
Gage
commits.
Stanifer at Westfield, for instance. You got
not only Stanifer, but the right fielder. The right fielder for Westfield is going to Ohio State. Center Grove's loaded with D1 guys as well, and Fisher's
somebody who's in that poll. I mean, they're getting votes. Somebody to keep their eye on is Lawrence Central, Ahmad Duff.
Oh, yeah, yes.
He's an outfielder. He's only a sophomore, but he's already verbally committed to Alabama.
Yeah.
And he's already been banging balls out of the ballpark already. So,
Mr. Duff, let me tell you something. I know you've only verbally committed to Alabama yet, But let me interest you in some of our Indiana colleges. Let's talk about IU. Let's talk about Purdue. Let's talk about ranked Notre Dame. Let's talk about Ball State. Let's talk about Butler. There's some good teams here in Indiana, buddy. I know you've only verbally committed, so
You don't want to get dinged for tampering, Dan.
I'll tamper. I'm not getting paid.
I've said that until you actually sign your name on the contract, you haven't really.
Don't put it in ink. Don't put it in ink, young man, until you've talked to the Indiana colleges. I'm just going to say that out loud and unapologetically. Let's keep moving here. And Steve, you mentioned stats. So let's look at some stats here. I made a cool little app, so I got an easy way. Now, this is based on, I got to say this is based on Max Preps. So I got to give credit to them, first of all. I love Max Preps. And, first thing you don't see on here is, our first player of the week, Decker, that right? Down in Evansville. Mm-hmm. And he had 6 home runs in that first 2 weeks, and don't see him on here. His stats aren't in Max Preps. So this is why this is not conclusive leaders. This is leaders per Max Preps. And most of the leaders are on here. So you're only going to miss a handful of them. But look at that Linton Stockton right there. It's got 2 guys in the top 5 with Bracy Brenneman and Jaden Miller. Then Joe Huffman had a week with Avon. And then there, of course, is the prodigal son, Max Clark, with 5 homers. I don't know if he had any this week, though, because he had 5 last week as well. Oscar Pegg from Shakamak, Logan Gibbs of Cascade, and Garrison Barile, I'm going to say. I'm probably going to butcher that, from Center Grove. All that talent. And at Center Grove, you're talking about Colin Stevens at Glenn. Glenn had a good week, too. He's got 4. Trey Harney at Greenwood Christian's got 4. Hogan Denny and Mooresville stock, boy, they're just looking good. Then Jake Winsenreed, the coach's son, Lawrence North there. Is that coach's son, right? At Lawrence North? That's right. He's got 4 of them. Let's look at some more stats here. Here's batting average. And, I could put this, the stats change as I change the variable of how many at bats. 25 was a good number, but batting average is one of those things where if I would have made this 30, the list might change, or if I'd have made it, 20, the list might have changed. But look at some of these players right here. Man, they're almost putting up area codes right here: 737, 679. 656. I don't see any Sweet Lou numbers up there, but at 800. But
no, they haven't reached that 800 yet, but they're getting close.
if anybody ever bats 800, we're going to call it the Sweet Lou Award, and we'll get something nice for them.
When you have to hit about? When you have to go about 30 for 32 some week to time like that?
You got some coaches' sons in here. I'm just looking. I don't want to name them all, but look good to see Brady Yergar there at Shakamak. That's coach's son. Ben Seitz in there.
Play already.
Yeah,
Raplavie and Ben Crone and Collins. I've seen them. I'm going to see Collins play again tomorrow.
North Montgomery there. That's a good sectional there. That's the sectionals. That North Montgomery sectional's got Northmont, Crawfordsville, South Vermilion. I think Greencastle. Boy, that's going to be a good sectional there in 3A. That's batting average. Let's take a look at strikeouts. I like this one always. Look at that. Connor Sims, Greenfield Central, still holding strong. He's got 49. And again, if the stats aren't in Max Preps, you don't get on this list. But some good. And Brennan Martin, I got to name him real quick, from Duggar Union, had a good week this week. Matter of fact, I think I might have him in the highlights for the week. But there were some no-nos thrown this week. But 49 strikeouts already for Connor Sims, currently the state. And matter of fact, Kobe Johnson at Hauser, I think, had a good week too. I think he's another one that we're going to highlight. There's that Hunter Collins that I've mentioned before from Riverton Park. Some people that can throw the ball right there for sure. Let's take a look at some of the highlights here real quick, guys. Let's move on. We haven't even got to college yet. Duggar Union, I mentioned that guy right there. Brendan Martin, he had 6 innings pitched, 12 Ks. And no hits through 6 innings at Columbus Christian there on April 21st. Got to mention him. Duggar Union, they're getting back into IHSAA, I think, next year. Is that right, Steve? Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
I know. I wonder if Coach is listening on the broadcast. He usually does. Some perfect games for you. The University, they had some really good performances this week. Got to mention them. Thomas Price, the senior, had 11 Ks and a no-no versus Short perfect game versus Shortridge on the 21st, and they went back to back perfect games because Ian Smitley, the senior, had 10 Ks versus Senior Catholic the next day, so they get to sport the uni chain there, which you know I love. Here's what I was wanting to talk about earlier with Center Grove. Here's some teams they've been playing. Now, this isn't all last week. Last week it was just Lawrence North and Cathedral. There's that big win, 17-1 versus Cathedral. So they went 8-3 versus Avon, who Avon stock's rising too. Terre Haute North 14-4, Edinburgh 20-0, Bloomington South 11-2. Then they just went off the chain. Warren Central 19-1, Whiteland 19-2, and that's a rivalry game too. Columbus North 15-2, close game versus Jeffersonville. Then those other two games. That is first of all, the winning percentage of these teams. This will make this stat important. Of these teams, now they tied their first game of the year versus Columbus North. We talked about that earlier. This is every game they've played after that tie. These teams that they've played have a combined winning percentage of 63%. So these aren't teams that they should be beating this big. But Center Grove outscored them 145-24. That's a 121 run differential over this span where they've gone 10-0. So that's why I was saying earlier, Cathedral stock has risen because of the two losses by Westfield. I got a feeling we're going to see the Trojans at number 1 in that 4A bracket. Let's move on here. Zionsville, this is that team that was number 1. Jeff, you were there at this game. This is the Zionsville. They kind of have a three-headed monster that they throw out every game. And I got to see them play versus Cathedral, actually. And they no-hit Cathedral also. So this is the second time. This time they had a 4-pitcher combined no-hitter. I saw them no-hit Cathedral in that three-headed monster, if you will, no-hitter. So, I mean, these guys are tough, and it's, talking to Coach Moore, it's something that they kind of use every game. And they've got these 3 guys right here that even though they're not in the top 10 right now, and you talk to any coach in the Hoosier Crossroads Conference, they'll tell you the same thing. If they can get out of that unbelievably tough sectional they're in, they could still make a run at the title with this pitching. Jeff, you were at one of these games, right? What's your take on this 4-headed monster they use versus Lafayette, Jeff?
Well, the thing about their pitchers, a couple of them throw a lot of gas, and then a couple of them throw some breaking stuff. They were throwing strikes, and they were really good. I mean, they were around the plate when they weren't throwing strikes. But that's the thing that impressed me is we probably Lafayette Jeff, and we're really young, but we had a lot of players that were caught looking. Either on the outside corner or a breaking ball right at them that bent into the strike zone. So that the things that impressed me with the 4-headed monster against us was just a couple of guys with some throwing the ball really hard, and then some other guys that had some breaking stuff, and they were throwing strikes, Dan.
Yeah, they were impressive. I tell you what, is seeing them if that team that I saw versus Cathedral. If I look at that team and I don't know anybody, if I didn't know anything about who's beat who in the rest of the season, I would say I can't imagine someone beating Zionsville. I mean, those guys look that good. So very impressive and fun to watch for sure. Got to mention this real quick. Your Hornets win 11-0 on the road tonight, and Trinity Lutheran behind a perfect game of Logan Holland right there for the Henryville Hornets. A perfect game for Logan Holland. And folks, we're gonna talk. Look at it. We've had 3 perfect games now and a no hitter. This is how hard it's going to be. Any other week, it would be very difficult to pick our Baseball Across India Player of the Week. But when you see the stats of our Player of the Week that we're going to mention here in a minute, you'll see how the tiebreaker was. Or you'll see how it got separated. Another big day here for Traders Point. Eli Meals, 12 innings pitched, 0 earned runs, and 18 Ks with only 1 free base right there. Good week for him. I had to throw that out there on that. Also got to throw this out here too. Another no-hitter, Gavin Fisher for the Shelbyville. And well, of course, the owner of the best hat in all of baseball right there too. But I got to mention Gavin Fisher throwing the no-no 20-0 versus a rivalry, Southwestern. Now that's the Southwestern in Shelbyville, not the Southwestern down in Hanover. Big win versus a rivalry and a no-hitter for a freshman. Keep your eye on Gavin Fisher. That's going to be a good one right there as they won 20-0 in a rivalry game. Look at this. Another no hitter with 19 Ks. This is the Hauser Jets right here. This is Cody or Kobe. Cody, I think Johnson. Complete game, no hitter, 19 strikeouts versus Waldron. That was amazing right there. What a performance! And any other week, 19 Ks puts you in the running for Player of the Week for sure. So great performance. And right here, Josh Erickson, 7 innings, no hitter, 10 Ks, 4 walks, 7-0 win versus Knox right there for the Pioneer. I wish I had a better picture of that, but great performance by him. 7-inning no hitter, 7-inning no hitter with 10 Ks and 4 walks. Talked about
Look
Carmel.
at the bottom of the screen and said there was sleet, so it wasn't the quality of the photo might not have been so bad. It was the sleet in the
Yeah.
photo.
Well, that makes it even more impressive what he did too. Because usually sleet and wet conditions favor the batter, or
Look at how the coach and the umpire are dressed. So
yeah, exactly. And that was what, just a week and a half ago. So and now we have 80 degrees. Welcome to Indiana, folks. Carmel, they 18-9 win. And the big part, the reason I wanted to put this out here, of course, we talked about earlier, Carmel stocks kind of dropped a little bit, but they had 6 big flies in this game right here versus North Central. The Hunter Snow, Griffin Wolf had 2 of them, Cam Carmichael and Kenny Bruntlett and Trip Schroeder each went yard versus North Central. So I had to throw that out there real quick. One of the fun things, got to throw this out here. Moose, I like Adam Mooselick right here. They call him Coach Moose. I talked about how much I love the uni chain. I looked at him right there and I was like, Coach, you got a new game award there? He's like, nope. And so he posted, and they can't wear chains during the game, so he's the chain guy. He gets all the players chains and wear them. I just had to throw that out there real quick. Coach Moose up there in Munster. Of course, he was at Whiteland a few years ago. Speaking of Munster, got to give a tip of the cap right here to Hobart, and Munster did too. This is one thing I love about baseball. This is what you see right there, the 25 jersey. That is the jersey worn by the late former coach for Mustangs that just passed a couple weeks ago, was it, Coach Shankin? I can't remember when it was. It was just recently, though. And Hobart put up his jersey on their fence. So, respect right there is what that is. That's why we put that. Folks, we talked about some stats earlier in the week. Take a look at this. Owen Willard. Let's talk about him for a second. This stat, we talked about it earlier in the week, and the responses were all just, wow. What do you say about this? When you talk about the one thing that he had, and let's talk about, because he had 2 things that really qualified him. One of them was a perfect game. And, perfect game by definition means nobody reaches first. So in 5 innings, he had 10 Ks and is a perfect game by pitching definition. But if you want to define perfect game just generally in this for baseball, let's add this stat in there too. Same game, he hit for the cycle. Perfect game on the mound. He hits for the cycle at bat. So Coach Willard, congratulations. Your son, Owen Willard, is this week's Baseball Across Indiana Player of the Week. Congratulations, Coach Willard, and your son, Owen Willard. Of course, Owen Willard came onto the scene. His stock rose last year when he was in the state finals and pitched a great game. And he hasn't stopped yet. Steve, if he's up there relatively close to you, have you got a chance to see him play yet?
No, but I may get a chance to do that this week or next. I've got a couple of games. Just find out when he's going to pitch.
Yep.
They play Westview. They play Westview in the Northeast Quarter Conference tournament on Tuesday, and I don't know if he's set to go. And and they play Garrett the following week.
Yeah.
So those are a
And well,
couple of
Garrett's looking good too.
one game Westview, one game's at Eastside.
I got a feeling that you're going to see Owen Willard versus Garrett because obviously it's a conference game, and Garrett's looking good right now. I think what are they? I don't know. I think they only got a couple losses, but they're looking good. So that's our baseball across Indiana Player of the Week. Congratulations, guys! We got about 5 minutes. Let's run through some college stuff here real quick. Got to give a tip of the cap to Tanner Craig. He's the all-time ace, all-time home run leader for the Aces. The new all-time home run leader for the Aces, Tanner Craig. Congratulations to him. And speaking of Evansville, right here, Evan Berkeley, the Missouri Valley Player of the Week right there. We're going to run through these guys. We got about 5-6 minutes left, and we still got our final out coming up. We're still in D1. We're talking about Dominic Milano right here. He had hit .857 last week with 2 doubles and a big fly. So he is on the Big East Weekly Honor Roll. He got recognized by the Big East Conference, so we wanted to recognize him. We talked about Ball State earlier. Tyler Schweitz. I think I'm Schweitz. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, Tyler. I apologize, but he did it again. They said he picks up his second MAC Sports Pitcher of the Week. He was the MAC Conference Pitcher of the Week for the second time this year, so we got to give a shout out to him. And let's look at the D1 stats here real quick. Of course, Ball State went up 3-1. Their stock's rising too. They're 24-14 now. The big one is still Notre Dame in the D1. They were 5-0 again this week, 26-8 overall. I think, looking at this right here, as far as teams that'll have a chance. Yeah. Teams that'll have a chance, I think Notre Dame is in. I think ISU still has a chance, and I think Ball State has a chance. Like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, I think that's going to depend on specifically how ISU does against like Dallas Baptist and, how Ball State runs the rest of the table here. But I think we're going to have one team, and Purdue's going to have to turn it around. Purdue started out on record-breaking status for Purdue. They've kind of hit a slump, and so their stock's going to have to change here real quick in order for them to get in. Let's talk D2 here real quick. USI, we didn't have an updated stat on that, but UND went 1-2. They're still right there around 500. I keep saying that they're going to end 500 or better. Same way with Purdue Northwest. They jumped over 500 this week with a 3-1 week. Let's talk D3 here real quick. And starting out with the Player of the Week for Rose-Hulman was Josh Messenbrink. Josh Messenbrink. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Josh. But the Conference Player of the Week right there. Congratulations to him. Let's look at the D3 standings here. We didn't have Anderson also because they were still playing, as well as Wabash. But Franklin kind of took a step back this week, going 1-3, but they're still looking strong at 23-9. And we got to give it to Coach Rosen there at Rose-Hulman too. First year coaching there, and that's a team you want to watch. Is Rose-Hulman over the next few years, because Coach Rosen had a really good record where he came from as well. And I think he's going to do some fantastic stuff there over the next few years. But Franklin continues to be Franklin. Had a tough week at 1-3, but they're not done yet. Earlham still doing what they do as well, 2-0 and 20-8. Of course, them and Franklin are both getting ranking stats. Here's a big one here as we go to NAIA. Man, did you guys see this? IU Kokomo was down 10-0 in the 9th and came back, and 11-10 deficit in 11th. It's just absolutely wild. They came back and won down 10-0 in the 9th and beat IU Southeast. Coach Real, that's so, the guy we just talked about at the beginning of the show, they got his 500th win. They came back on them to make it even more impressive. And this is, the person who tweeted this, NAIA ball. I love those guys. Gutierrez, I think his name is, that runs that podcast. If you guys like baseball podcasts, tune into the NAIA ball podcast. And Tony Gutierrez there does a fantastic job of covering the NAIA scene, which we all love. Speaking of IU Kokomo, the River States Conference Pitcher of the Week is from IU Kokomo, Owen Callaghan. Am I pronouncing that right? Owen Callahan, I'm going to say. Sorry, Owen. Pitcher of the Week for the River States Conference. And standing into a lot of NAIA awards this week. Whoops, I think I might have skipped past it. Nope. NAIA Crossroads Player of the Week, and I knew I clicked that too quick. Let me go back here real quick because I got to mention him. Eli McDonald of Bethel was the Crossroads Player of the Week this week. So a lot of Indiana teams getting some recognition here. The NAIA stats, Bethel had a good week. So did Calumet St. Joe at 5-1. Huntington North 3-1. They're 22-18 now, looking good. There's that IU Southeast. They went 3-2, but they're still holding strong at 31-13. And Marion and Oakland, we said that early on too as well. They're both going to end up over 500. Our NAIA is looking good this year. Of course, USF's still over 500. Taylor is being Taylor, 32-16. So you got two teams already from Indiana with over 30 wins in NAIA, with Taylor and IU Southeast looking good. Quick look at the Juco scene. Vincennes went 3-2 this week. Stock's rising a little bit. You know, that Juco, it's all about the player production more than it is team wins. It's about developing players. So that's good to see that they had a good week there. Let's talk a little bit about pros. Of course, Zach McKinstry, his stock's going up. He's hitting 404 now for the AAA Dodgers. So, you know, he's on the rise. And guys, if you have any other pro things, go ahead and mention them here real quick. I just want to run through this as we are already at the top of the hour. But McKinstry, keep looking good. He's right here. You say it and I'll bring it right to you. Elkhart Central grad Tanner Tully made his debut this week for the Yankees, right? No, Guardians. Sorry. Guardians.
Cleveland Guardians got called up because of COVID IL, and he pitches in Yankee Stadium, makes his major league debut. He got DJ LeMahieu to ground out first batter. Aaron Judge goes to a 3-2 count on the second one, and then he hits it in the right field porch. And then, but then that was the only run he gave up in two innings. So he did pretty well. He was up because of the COVID IL. There were 3 players, and he went back. Was sent back to AAA. But you know,
welcome to the bigs. You got to face the Yankees.
First taste of the big leagues. I'm sure he'll have some more.
Speaking of bigs, right here, our boy Colson Montgomery from Southridge gets his first single A home run this week. With the Ballers, that's right. So we gotta throw that out. Yep, big moment in history right there. I need to get a hold of their coach, and I need to get one of them hats right there. We talked about Evansville a lot earlier. We got to mention right there, UE grad Kyle Freeland signed a contract this week, $64.5 million. So, you know, he's looking good going forward. And, of course, our boy Kevin Kiermaier, who's on with us earlier in the year. This was a neat one. Steve, you posted this one. I appreciate you doing it. I didn't know this. Kevin Kiermaier, he's playing the Cubs, and his brother, Dan Kiermaier, I didn't know this, is the head groundskeeper for the Cubs. So that was pretty cool. Guys, yeah. Any final comments?
Brother too.
Yeah, right. I went through our college and pro segments pretty quick there because I wanted to spend a lot of time on high school. But any parting thoughts before we go to our final out for the week?
Well, Dan, I just want to say the weather's changing. Real excited. The Reds broke their losing streak. Got a win today, and just real excited about moving forward here with the weather changing and college baseball's in full tilt. We got 5 games this week. So I'm on cloud 9 as far as baseball is concerned, Dan.
Isn't that the truth? It's finally good weather in Indiana, and we get to be at baseball games. Don't forget, matter of fact, speaking of that, don't forget, up in the region this week, or no matter where you are, turn into Region Sports Network. I'm going to be up there with them, and I'm going to be behind the mic doing some talking to those guys of the Region Sports Network for the Hobart and Highland game. That's going to be a good game too, so I'm looking forward to that. Guys, let's wrap things up for today's Final Out. Today is April 24th, 2022. If you're just tuning in, make sure you go to baseballacrossindiana.com to see the full episode of This Week in Baseball Across Indiana. For today's Final Out, I want to talk about something I saw this week and then something that a lot of people saw this week. Of course, you saw a lot of unruly behavior at New York from right field. Everybody's, I guess it was right field or somewhere in the bleachers there. They're throwing out beer mugs and everything else. One of them hit an umpire. Just stupid behavior. This week I saw that on a lesser scale. But before I tell you what I saw, we also saw a few games this week get canceled because of no umpires. And in a small part of that reason that we're having problems with umpires is because of you people, the fans. And I make no apologies by saying this. This week, I was at a game, and I see it at every game. I'm not going to say what game I was at, and you see it all over the place. You see fans yelling at the umpires like they actually have a clue what's going on. And you don't. And I'm going to tell you straight up, if you are at a high school baseball game and you are yelling at umpires, you are a lesser human being. You are not on the same parallel as the functioning part of society. Simmer down. You're at a high school baseball game. Grow up. There's not a single umpire in the state of Indiana that throws a game or calls anything other than as they see it. And what you yell at them only makes you look stupid. I'm Hardy the Hat Guy, and I make no apologies for that statement. Have a good week, folks. This is Baseball Across Indiana. Take care.